Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about clarifying how we contribute to the selling process rather than just the marketing process, which is very much focused on creating the appointment and getting the salesperson in front of the customer. Over the last 15 or 20 years, marketing has predominantly focused on lead generation, awareness building, nurturing, and putting all the sort of technology behind automating that process, and it's done a pretty good job of that. So it's done a good job of getting the salesman to the point where they get in front of the customer. But I think that the evidence that we have, at least, is that we could be doing more in marketing to support the selling process, by which I mean the point at which the salesperson is engaged with and discussing with the customer. How can sales and marketing collaborate, work more closely together to make that a more effective process for everybody involved? So in order to do that, I think it's really important for us to understand what's happened in the world of B2B selling and marketing over the course of the last 15 years or so. Around about 2011, the Corporate Executive Board, the CEB, big research body, wrote a book called The Challenger Sale. And the Challenger Sale was predominantly about how sales and marketing needed to change its approach post-2008, so post the recession. And they researched a whole body of companies, thousands of companies in the B2B world, about the way that they buy and the way that they make decisions post the recession. And fundamentally what CEB found was that people had become hugely risk averse. They didn't buy as individuals anymore, they bought as a committee. So you couldn't just sell to one person typically, you were selling to a group of people. And those people were buying based on consensus. So they had to reach consensus about being able to make a decision. And that was, of course, in the post-2008 era. Nobody wanted to put their head above the parapet. Nobody wanted to be seen to be making a big enterprise-style decision on their own. So it meant that as sellers, we had to be conscious of the fact that we were dealing with more than one person. That meant that the sales process was typically more protracted than it had been previously. It was much longer, and that the average order value was a bit lower because actually people were so risk averse they were happier to stay with the status quo. At that point in Challenger selling, CEB broke down the different types of selling and suggested that there was a different type of salesman. We needed somebody who could go in and challenge the customer's perspective and help them think more differently, think more commercially about how to solve the problem. It was a really seminal piece of research, and many organisations that embraced it managed to challenge the status quo. Those that didn't really started to find their opportunities getting smaller, the competitive market getting harder. And the Challenger salesman or Challenger sales was about trying to position yourself differently. The latest research from the CEB is called the Challenger Customer, and that's looking now beyond the initial piece of research, not about the sales and marketing folks, but actually about the buyer themselves. What does it mean now for the buyer who sits in this environment? How are they looking at things differently? And if we don't understand how people are making purchasing decisions, it's very hard to support the sales process in selling to them effectively. So the Challenger Customer now, looking at the buyers, have managed to really consolidate around this idea that there's a group of people making a decision. So you're not selling to one type of decision maker, you're selling to lots of different departments, and they evidence that there's somewhere between 5 and 6 people or groups or departments that you're selling to now when you make any big B2B sale. So put that in your own organisation, in your own industry. Is it a technical buyer? Is it a technical buyer and a financial buyer and a governance buyer and a risk buyer? What sort of buyers would you be selling into? So you have to be thinking there's more than one person, more than one group. What they found was that those people didn't come together to agree, to form consensus about what they were trying to buy. Rather, they were all trying to buy something slightly different to solve certain problems in their own departments. That makes it really difficult to sell into. Actually, what they found was that it was relatively easy to get people to a position where you could sell to them. However, it was really difficult for them to buy. And that was because they're buying in buying groups, all of whom are only representing their own interests. So it was about how we help those people reach consensus about what the problem is. If we can help them understand and identify what the problem they're trying to solve is and agree on that, then we have something that we can sell to them. We have almost a piece of unique positioning. So maybe that's how we should be trying to support the sales team. And they said you don't want to be selling to the influencers anymore, you need to be selling to the mobilizers. So you need to identify who the mobilizers are in the company, by which they mean the people who can make things happen. If you can identify those people and sell to those people and give those people the tools that they need to mobilize their colleagues and the other people in the buying group, then you stand a chance of making the sale. They also teach the difference between commercial insight and thought leadership. And marketing's always been really good at talking about thought leadership and providing thought leadership to the customers and to the sales teams. But I don't think many people understand the difference between thought leadership and commercial insight. And the CEB recognise that now commercial insight is what we need to be delivering. The difference as they see it is that thought leadership is helping your customers think differently about you as a company or a set of products and services. Commercial insight is helping your prospect or customer think differently about them and how they can do things differently, looking at it through a different commercial lens, for example. So how do we help our salespeople sell to the mobilizers? How do we help them provide a different commercial insight? And how do we equip those people then to go on and sell to the rest of their peers or the rest of the other people in the decision buying group? And that's what the CEB is teaching at the moment. The other piece of research that I really think it's worth you considering is Daniel Pink's To Sell is Human. It's a really brilliant book that looks at how in fact we're all salespeople, whether we consider ourselves to be salespeople or not. If selling is the act of asking people or persuading people to think or do something differently or to make a different choice, then we all sell almost every day. And that can be as simple as convincing your husband, wife, partner, boyfriend, girlfriend that you want to see one film rather than another, that you're going to go and see one show rather than a different one, that you're going to eat Italian rather than Chinese, that you want the colour blue rather than the colour red in terms of the car that you're about to buy. We're all selling, we're all persuading people of things every day. He talks about the idea of moving from a position of caveat emptor or buyer beware to a position of caveat venditur, by which he means seller beware. And he says the reason that the seller needs to be aware now is because the buyer is so much better informed. In the old days, it used to be that the salesperson held all the cards. The salespeople knew all the features and functions of the products and service, and we could present them in a way that would make them sound of significant perceived value to the customer who didn't really know any better. But now the customer is significantly better armed and considerably better researched, often better than the salespeople who are selling to them. The example that he gives in the book is when you walk into a car showroom, for example, the salesperson on the other side may well know all the features and benefits of the car that they're selling. They might know all the finance and procurement options or purchasing options for the car that they're selling. But the chances are they won't know all of your options as a buyer and all the things that you could consider as an alternative. And nowadays, as a buyer, the internet provides us with an absolute wealth of market research and information. So if we're going to buy a car, typically we would have looked at all the other alternatives open to us. We would know all of the features and functions and specifications of the cars we're looking at from all the different marques and brands. We will be able to assess efficiency, fuel efficiency, cost effectiveness, the price of running them, all the different finance options. We're really well armed when we go in to buy a car right now. And on the other hand, the person selling to us only really tends to know about their own product and service. So if that salesperson doesn't have as much knowledge as we do, they can no longer leverage the knowledge they used to have about the product and service on us. Rather, they're kind of at our mercy as buyers. So it's not caveat emptor anymore, it's not buyer beware anymore, it's vendor beware. So he talks about this idea of information parity, which means that there's a fair chance that the person sitting on the other side of the table really has as much, if not more, knowledge about the thing that you're selling or the situation you're selling into as you do. So how do we support our sales teams as they move from a position of owning all the cards or owning all the information to a position where they need to sit round the table and discuss with the client as if they are a peer, rather than somebody they've got to go and win, somebody they've got to challenge, somebody they've got to overcome? How do we move it from a sales pitch to a sales discussion, to a dialogue? It's a sort of professional courtesy, that's the way I look at it, that, you know, we're not moving in an environment where we can trick people, where we can find psychological games to move them through a sales cycle. People now really see straight past that. They really don't engage. People like to talk about their own product, or rather their own situation. They like to discuss the challenges they have with somebody they might consider an advisor, somebody they're looking for to help them with. So we need to support our sales teams in that role. The other thing that Dan Pink talks about is attunement, by which he means context. How do we tune the proposition that we're making, the message that we're giving? How do we put it in a context that the person we're talking to can really understand? If we always talk about things from our perspective, the way that we see them, we make it much harder for people to engage with us. And if people can't engage with us, if they can't really understand, it's very hard for them to buy. I always think of this in terms of the number of intellectual steps or decision, the cognitive steps that a buyer has to make before they can engage with you properly. And if you're talking only ever about things from your perspective, then the customer has to first of all understand who you are, and then what it is you've got to sell, and then they've got to work out how what you've got to sell might work for them, and then they've got to work out how they fit that into their environment, and then they've got to work out how they compare that with everything else. That's an awful lot of cognitive steps, of intellectual jumps and decisions that the buyer has to make before they can even really get down to the nitty-gritty of where the value is for them. So as a seller, if you can align your proposition, your offering, and and what it is you're saying in a way that makes your customer immediately able to understand the value of it to them specifically, then you've removed all of those cognitive steps. You've started straight away at a point of information parity or equality, where you can have a discussion like two peers, each working at the same level, trying to solve a problem or trying to unpick a puzzle. So attunement. And the last thing he talks about then is clarity. Making things easy, making things clear for people to understand. If we make things clear and easy for people to understand, then they tend to engage much more quickly. The whole process is more efficient. In around about 1970s and in the early 1980s, there was a thing that we called fear, uncertainty and doubt. And organisations like, IBM, actually this is attributed to IBM and IBM's competitors. It was about that era. We're talking about very high value software sales, when actually what they tried to do was create an idea of fear, uncertainty and doubt in the customer's mind. And the fear, uncertainty and doubt they were trying to spread was about their competitors' products and services. So they tried to spread the idea that you wouldn't buy from this company because it could fall over. If it fell over, you'd be fired for it. Or that it wouldn't work in the way you expected it to do, or they were trying to bamboozle you and cheat you in some way or another. So the whole idea in the 70s and 80s was selling around fear, uncertainty and doubt, making people worried about either the competitor's products, or about the situation they were in. Well, people are a bit smarter than that now, and nobody really likes to be sold to on the basis they're made to feel terrified about something. Actually, what happens when people are made to feel terrified about things in today's society or today's commercial environment means they tend not to do anything at all. They tend to revert to the status quo because doing nothing is a really safe option. And if you're making people scared and uncertain about the future, they're really unlikely to make a buying decision. So we know that we can no longer use the fear, uncertainty and doubt piece of messaging in order to get people to engage with us and to have a sensible sales process. The other thing that we've been looking at is the idea of simplicity. And this work by Richard Koch, actually it's pronounced, and Greg Lockwood, really is really quite impressive. It's very simple, as you might expect. And it looks at the really large organisations that you would consider have totally dominated their market. They've done so by simplifying either the product offering or the way that they position it, or the price made it easy to buy. And by doing so, they've totally dominated the market that they're in. He gives the example of Ford, for example, who first of all simplified the product so that it was easy to produce and make a mass production model. And then he realised that although it made that really efficient, it still made the end price really quite high. So he sold a lot of Model T Fords, but he didn't. But he could have sold more if he was able to simplify all the engineering processes, which meant he could drop the price. So he kept bringing the price down until he hit a mass volume price market. And he did that by simplifying the way in which he built the cars. By simplifying his cost of production, he was able to simplify the price, and by simplifying the price, he could literally dominate the market. IKEA did exactly the same thing. They found really high quality design, but simplified the process of bringing it to the customer. They made everything much simpler, so they reduced the cost of production, the cost of delivery, right the way down, and simplified the pricing structure. So it made it easy for people to buy. It's the most successful example of a furniture organisation globally. Absolutely phenomenal business. McDonald's kind of speaks for itself. Really simple product, really simple solution, really low cost. You can argue about all the ethics behind it, etc., but as a go-to-market offering, it's substantially successful. Apple, of course, spent billions making something very complicated into something very simple. Something very simple that a 6-year-old child, a 4-year-old child can use, but the intelligence behind it is mind-blowing. So by making things really simple, you own the market. I guess one of the best examples of all of this is Google. So again, Google's interface with its customer is the simplest of all time. It's a white page with a box in the middle, and you literally type in anything you like and it gives you all your answers. And I always say to people I talk to, you don't want to know what's behind that screen, what's behind that box. It's so complicated it will blow your mind. It doesn't matter what's behind the box. Does it give you the answers you're looking for? Is the interface easy to use? Absolutely. So by making things really simple for customers to engage with, or simple so that most people can buy it, these organisations have been phenomenally successful. So simplification, along with clarity, along with information parity, assuming everybody's on the same page. These are the messages that are really coming through when we think about how we have to communicate with our customers and how salespeople have to sell and people are buying currently. So organisations and people have been hiding behind complexity in the past, and today it's no longer relevant. Even organisations like the wine trade, for example, that for many years thrived on the idea that wine was really elite, there was some kind of mystique about it, that everything was really complicated. There's no point in you trying to learn about it because actually, it would just take you too long. So, just buy what we tell you to buy. And they did that by putting all sorts of wine laws and regulations in, which actually, to be honest, most growers don't really follow. Certainly, a lot of the French wine laws, hugely complicated and completely flouted continuously. But they made it deliberately complex so it had some mystique, because they felt that with a level of mystique would come a level of perceived and assumed value. The same is true of the technology world, the IT world. In the old days of IT, it was complicated, and it was almost deliberately made complicated because then it had a level of perceived value, and people would be sort of almost intimidated. If you didn't know or understand it, you'd just agree to most things because you felt you had to have it. So the legal profession, the wine profession, the technology profession, all of those things over the past have hidden behind complexity, and they've found that doing so is no longer serving them, and so they've all sought to make themselves easier and easier and easier to understand and easier to do business with. A great example of that would be SAP. My SAP is a great idea of trying to simplify something that's really quite complicated and bring it down to the level of the SME. So people have hidden behind complexity for a long time, and it doesn't really work anymore. And that's really because complexity breeds confusion. And we know that when people are confused, they don't buy. They can't buy. And they tend to revert to the status quo. So we need to make things simple. We need to unclutter them. We need to make them almost democratic so that everybody can engage with us. So we do a lot of work with organisations that are in the sales area or the sales departments of organisations. And we find that there are consistently 5 key areas that those organisations are struggling with. these things come up time and time again, and for the last few months we've been running a survey and asking people to rate these 5 areas for us. I think the data that's coming out is quite interesting. So of the 5 questions, the first one we always ask is, can everyone in your sales organisation tell the same story consistently? Most of them tell us that's a really, really high priority for them, and that's because there's huge efficiency if everybody is telling the same story, selling the same product and service in broadly the same way. Then we get best practice, and by getting best practice we become more efficient, and becoming more efficient means we can be more profitable, we can win more often, we reduce our selling cycle, the sales cycle, we tend to hit our numbers more effectively. If you are in the operations function, the commercial function of the business, it's really important what the sales people are going out there and promising you can actually deliver. So the last thing you want is a team of salespeople going out selling completely bespoke products and services all the time, because it's really hard to operate. You can't deliver on your service level agreement if everything that comes back through the door is completely unique and different. If I'm sitting there with my commercial hat on, that's the last thing I want. I never know whether I'm going to be profitable. The reason why we build products, services and solutions in the way that we do is because we want a level of consistency, and that consistency gives us efficiency, and the efficiency gives us profitability. So our salespeople need to be able to tell the same story consistently, and we ask the organisations how well are you doing with that. And it's interesting, as you'll see here, 77% of the sales organisations that we talk to say that they're not able to do that as effectively as they would like. And a lot of these are big and established organisations. The next one then, how easy is it for everybody in your sales organisation to get access to up-to-date and compelling sales materials at the right part in the sales process as and when they need them? Interesting, 85%. 85% of the audience have come back and said, actually, we're nowhere near as good at this as we should be. We don't find it easy to get the collateral we need up to date. From a marketing perspective, I know how frustrating that is when you feel that you're producing everything the sales team should need, and yet everybody's off with their own PowerPoint decks, making up their own collateral and screaming for case studies that actually you published 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago, and you've even emailed them about them. They just don't use them. So sometimes it's not that you're not providing them or the marketing isn't producing them. It's simply that they're not positioned or presented in a way that the sales team find them easy to use. And if they don't find it easy to use, if they don't find the content compelling or relevant to each sales conversation, they're just not going to use it. I mean, they'll make their own stuff up. And that's the worst possible thing for efficiency and for effectiveness, as we know. The next one then, portfolio selling or up and cross selling, by which I mean, can everybody in your sales organisation sell all of the products and services they need to be able to sell confidently and competently, and consistently, I guess. And you might be surprised to know that salespeople are some of the most risk-averse people you will have in your organisation. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but think about it. Most sales operations work on an on-target earning basis. They get a bonus, commission on top of a basic salary. I don't know any salesperson that buys their house or their car or runs their lifestyle based on their basic salary. We all expect them to be ambitious professionals who are seeking to make the most amount of money possible. And in order to do that, they reduce their risk of failure. And they reduce their risk of failure by selling things they are comfortable selling and confident selling to people they are comfortable and confident in talking to. That's great. But what happens if you ask them to sell other things in a broader portfolio, things perhaps they're not quite so confident in selling, and potentially they have to sell to new types of people they've never sold to before. Very often that could be more senior people, especially if they're selling a whole portfolio of products or services rather than just selling some of the components. So how easy is it for your salespeople to be able to do that? Now actually they've been a bit more bullish in this particular instance here. We've got important but not able to do it so well. Where are we? 62%. 62% are still not able to do it properly. 23% on the other hand do think they're doing quite well. But we're still up in the 62% that can't do this as well as they would like to. Customer-centric selling, one of the most important areas, I think. As we've discussed before, when you think about the challenger sale and you think about to sell is human, you think about simplicity. If people understand it, they can buy. People understand what the Apple iPad does for them, they understand what Google does for them, they understand what a Model T Ford is, and they understand what the IKEA stuff is like, and so they buy it. It's not complicated. So how can we put the proposition with the sales team in front of a customer in context the customer will understand? How well do we do that? Well, 38% of the audience so far think that they do it really well, but there's still another 61% that again aren't convinced that we're doing a particularly good job of this. Lastly then, selling into the white space. And selling into the white space is a very sales term. If you're familiar with the idea of account-based marketing, well, this is account-based selling. So very often sales teams will look at the accounts that they currently have and do some analysis to work out what they're currently selling to them and what else from the portfolio they could or should be selling. So where are the opportunities to sell a few more things to the existing customer base? Of course, this is a really important strategy for sales teams because it means the cost of sale, the time and cost involved in making a sale can be much lower than going out to find a new customer. And the more of your products and services you can sell to your customers, the greater barrier to entries you build for your competitors. So it's a really important piece of analysis. Here again, quite bullish, 62% say, 62% say they don't do it well enough, but 23% say they do it quite well. Another 15% important but unable to. So where are we? A total of 77% say that actually we can't do this as well as we would like. Lots of sales directors say to us, crikey, if you could give us something that could help us do really rapid white space analysis and then take a very bespoke proposition back to our customers, that would really help us up and cross-sell. So let's just recap a bit. The marketing over the last 15 years have done a really good job of helping salespeople get in front of qualified prospects, both qualifying the prospects and helping that first meeting happen. But we've not done such a good job helping answer the second question. What I mean by that is the marketing proposition, the thing that hooks the customer in, is usually the thing that helps them that piques their interest, their first level of interest, helping them address the first question. The minute that the salesperson is sitting in front of the customer, the second question that they're posed with is usually a much more customer-driven, customer-centric question about what it means specifically for that customer, or a bit more detail or granularity. And if the salesperson isn't armed and supported in doing that, then they're not able to sell efficiently or effectively, certainly not able to do so confidently. So we need to do that next. And then beyond that, we need to facilitate the internal sale. What I mean by that is that we know that now people are buying in buying groups. And so we have to make the proposition presentation that we make to our customers easy for our customers to go and sell upwards and internally to everybody else in that buying group that needs to contribute to that decision. And unless we present the proposition in a way that means that they understand it and can go and present it confidently and competently on our behalf to everybody else, then we're likely to lose out. So I would suggest that we put things in the context of our customer. We use the language of our customer because it makes it easy for our customer to understand and our customer to go on and sell internally for us. And we've got lots of evidence of this happening using Klarifi. So at Klarifi, what we do is we make it really easy for you to explain what you do, and we start off by simplifying what you say and how you say it so that more people can understand it. We use a visual language and context of the customer to make it easy for everybody to understand and engage with. And then we link all of that we link that picture to relevant content and collateral and videos and forms, anything you like, so that everybody can see the picture, see the story, and then drill down into more detailed information. That's all underpinned by a content management system, which means that either we or our customers can edit all of that underpinning content on the fly. And then we can integrate it too. We can integrate it with CRM systems or any other form of sort of marketing tool that you like, just to really bring the thing to life, to make a sort of closed loop sales and marketing process. We've been doing it for a long time now. It must be 15 years or more. We started off doing this on big sheets of paper, which was good fun. If you ever took a big rolled up A1 or A0 poster into an office, people were quite intrigued. At least security wanted to know what was in it. And the minute you unrolled it on a big boardroom table, it tried to roll itself back. And so everybody would put their hands on it. And that meant everybody sitting around the table had their hands on your proposition, and they were all looking at one central story, which was largely about them or the challenges that they face. So it was very successful. And there's a lot of great thinking and science behind the whole process of visual thinking, and using visual thinking with words in the right balance in order to create a really effective story. We're using Klarifi, using a digital version of that. We won a nice award in 2014, which was the Digital Customer Experience Awards. We were particularly proud about winning that because we beat some very, very large organisations with significant budgets, and we're obviously a much smaller organisation. And the reason we won was because we were so successful in improving, transforming ultimately the way that our customers sold. We increased the average order value exponentially, and the return on investment for them was over 2,000%. And it was simply because we helped them move from selling the odd product out of a catalogue, or products if you like, out of a catalogue, to selling a whole portfolio of products and services in one go. And we helped the salespeople make that transition, and we helped them sell to much senior buyers within the organisation, into much larger budgets. So it was a real transformative kind of solution that we delivered, and we took that solution in 2014 that we delivered for that particular customer and turned it into Klarifi, and that's where we are as an organisation today, but that's where it started. The reason that we're getting so much interest and people kind of recognise the value of what we do is because it's almost the antithesis of PowerPoint. And PowerPoint has been a fantastic tool for, it must be 20 years or so now, but there are some challenges with it, and I think we're probably all familiar with them. If we think about it in a bit more detail, other than the fact that they tend to send us to sleep, PowerPoint presentations are by their very nature sequential, by which I mean the salesperson is in charge of delivering one slide after another slide after another slide, just like I am, ironically, in this particular example, which means that the salesperson is just delivering a monologue, and that's a sales pitch. And I can't remember the last time anybody said to me, come and give me a sales pitch. Most of customers and prospects would actually prefer to have an intelligent discussion with somebody they consider to be a peer, somebody that might be able to help them. It's really important in terms of the psychology of the sales process. If you position yourself as a salesperson by making a pitch to a customer, then you immediately put the customer in a position where their job is to be a buyer, and a buyer's job is to try not to spend money or find fault in your product or to compare it to anybody else. Actually, you don't really want to be in a pitching environment. You really want to be in a discussion environment, which is what Dan Pink is saying in To Sell is Human. We really want to have a dialogue rather than a monologue. The other thing that the customer is always concerned about is, when is the presentation going to get meaningful or relevant to them? Because they can't see it until it's finished. And of course the difference with Klarifi, with a big picture, a big digital rich picture that's all in their context, is both the customer and the salesperson can immediately see all that's on offer, and they can guide the conversation. They've got as much at stake in the conversation, and they can guide it and evidence the priorities and say, I want to start here, not over here. It makes it much more inclusive, much more involving. And by using Klarifi, by getting the customer on side and sharing the big picture and enabling the customer to navigate the conversation, it truly differentiates the way in which you and your organisation will be perceived. And I've put in the word here hypnagogic because it made me laugh, but you know, everybody thinks that PowerPoint presentations send you to sleep. And they send you to sleep for all of the reasons that are above there, because it's sequential, it's a monologue, it's a complete drawl of a pitch. It's not yet relevant or interesting. It could go on forever. And typically they're so undifferentiated, you really don't stand out from the crowd. So we want to move away from PowerPoint. And that's exactly what Klarifi does for people. And it works for these reasons, really. It works because what we do is really simple. We help you tell a really complicated story really simply so that everybody can understand it. And as you've seen, people really appreciate simplicity. Simplicity breeds clarity, and clarity breeds confidence. When was the last time you trusted somebody who came at you by making something really, really complicated? When was the last time you felt confident about that person? Whereas if somebody's really open-handed and being really simple in the way they're talking to you and explaining things really clearly, tends to breed confidence. So simplifying is really important, not just for your customer, but for you as an organisation. If you can simplify what it is that you do and what it is that you offer to your customer base, you'll find everybody in the organisation understands it, and you'll get real value from that. We also put it onto multiple platforms, by which I mean that you can present it on a big screen, on a laptop, on a mobile phone, on a tablet, on a massive touch screen. We also do it on hard copy, so we often find that what we've developed as a picture, becomes quite iconic, by which I mean that people will recognise it when they see it as being your product, your proposition, or your company. So they're very often used to repeat the message, to build the recall, if you like, through posters, through exhibition stands, etc. We've often found when we talk to people about projects we've done for them in the past or pictures they've seen in the past, that when they're describing the proposition back to us, they will recall the elements of the picture. So for example, they'll say, oh yes, I remember that proposition, it was great. On this side you had some people, on that side you had a bridge, and then you had some people underneath it, and then I remember as a railway line going right the way through the middle, and people are using their hands to point out on the picture in midair where they remember things being, because that's how people remember things, that's how they remember pictures. We put it into context so that people can instantly understand it, because we're not trying to scare people, we're not trying to make it challenging for people to understand. We want people to understand intuitively and instinctively what it is we're saying so that they can engage with it. And finally, we know that eye candy works. People just like pictures. There's all sorts of debate about what percentage of the population are visual learners, but let's just accept most people prefer pictures, most people like dealing with pictures, but pictures on their own aren't enough. It's very easy to put a picture up and for everybody in the room to have an entirely different interpretation of what that picture means. So you've got to have pictures with words and with direction in order for people to understand. There's another part of the population, or another part of most people actually, who really prefer what we would call kinesthetic learning, by which we mean by touching and engaging with something. So a lot of people will learn from doing, ultimately. So if we combine visuals with the right balance of words, with the ability to interact with something, we know that it helps people learn and understand more effectively. So fundamentally, eye candy or pictures work. So organisations are using Klarifi for all sorts of things. We use it for internal communications. We use it for customer journeys, both for the customer and for mapping customer journeys. We use it for project planning, for helping people iterate ideas inside an organisation. We help it for explaining methodologies and for keeping people engaged with methodologies. We're using it more and more for training tools now, for bringing people up to speed on a new concept or initiative, and even in an e-learning environment for new joiners into a company to learn all about the products and services the company has to offer and the value that they present to a customer. We're using it too for bids and tenders. It's a really great way for making your proposition stand out. Just imagine that you're selling into perhaps a hospital or an airport, and rather than sending a 40-page document, what you send is a picture of that customer's hospital or airport with all of your products and services aligned to the specific areas or stakeholder groups within that environment that you will deliver value to, and then enable them to click on a different drill down which will show them the detail of your proposition from a commercial perspective, from a technical perspective, from a regulatory perspective, from a human capital perspective, from every one of the stakeholders who's got to make a decisions perspective. So everybody can see the same story in their language from their own perspective. It's really powerful. Everybody else will be sending in a deck. With obviously the supporting document. And that's not to say you can't send in a supporting document, but I guarantee this one will get more attention. And then of course finally, sales tools. People are using it all the time now for differentiating their proposition, for having a different sort of discussion with their customer. So we've got lots of recent examples that we can talk you through, and they're all different. People come at these things from a completely different perspective. We have a different audience that we're talking to each time, and so we need to use a different visual language. I won't talk you through each of these now, but you can see that some of them are cityscapes, some of them are process maps, some of them are about engaging children, and I'll let you guess which one that is, and one of them is about engaging the small business customers around accountancy issues. I wonder if you can guess which that one is. We'd love to talk you through each of them, but the design that we put in place not only represents the visual language that the customer wants to portray, but also the context and the people that you're selling into. We have developed a very robust process for delivering Klarifi projects now. As we say, this is based on 15 plus years of experience. We know that every project is bespoke and different because every company is bespoke and different, and their offerings want to be or need to be seen to be bespoke and different. So while it is a creative deliverable at the front end, we know that in order to be cost effective and efficient and to deliver something technically that's very, very sound, we need to have a very robust model behind how we deliver it. And that's what we've worked very hard to engineer, and we constantly iterate each stage of this process based on experience, so we get better and faster and more efficient as we get more experienced. But it's fundamentally a 6-stage process. The first step is what we call information extraction, and that's quite good fun. That's usually about a series of very fast cycle workshops where we get all of the stakeholders in the room and we try to gain some kind of clarity and consensus about what it is we're trying to say and to whom we're trying to say it. It's really important that we get everybody involved in that as much as possible, because we need everybody to buy in. It's a really cathartic experience for the organisations we work for, because very often they discover things about each department or each of the stakeholders they hadn't realised previously. So it's really good for being able to really decide on, gain consensus about what it is you're trying to deliver and what it is you're trying to say. That's also when we start to pull in any relevant collateral or supporting material, or identify other kind of collateral video or supporting material that you or your marketing function may need to go off and create. And of course we can help you with that, but typically people have that functionality in-house. Then we pull all of that information in-house ourselves, and the messaging team work with the instructional design team, and we agree the priorities and weighting, and we come up with really what the key kind of visual components are. Pretty much at the same time, we then send out a visual graphical survey, and what we ask each of the stakeholders in the customer side really about 10 questions, and they pick from sort of, do you like this picture or that one or this one or that one, and we're asking them questions about how formal they want to be, how absolutely accurate they want to be, whether they want to be very technical or whether they want to be fun and engaging, those kinds of things. And it's really about getting consensus about the look and feel of what it is we need to design. And then we create a wireframe, which is a very simple line drawing, which shows the kind of the message flow, if you like, the order and rate and mix of things, and the way that we're going to lay it out. And once we've got that developed, and we start to take that then into the development process, we create the actual digital rich picture. That's the time when we start to work on the messaging composition, by which we mean that we decide with you which of the messages are most important, if you like, the hierarchy of the messages, and then how we're going to structure the picture so it's the most natural dialogue. What's interesting is we don't expect to get it right first time. Once we've built the first version of it, then we would suggest that you run it past a couple of friendly customers, at least internally, to make sure the flow works for you. There's absolutely no doubt that you will iterate it over time as the story changes or you get better at presenting it, or that your customer tells you which areas are more important to focus on. That's fine, but we start off with something that everybody can use, and we build that into a content management system that enables you to change the message content and all the underpinning information to support the dialogue. And then we push the deployment button, if you like, and the deployment button pushes it out onto all of the platforms that you want to distribute it on. So that could be tablet, could be iPhone, or a mobile phone, and any format that you like. And of course, if we need to print it, we'll print it for you too. Go live then is about training people to use it, getting it out in front of customers and doing whatever kind of launch that you need to use, and we'll support you with that. We also have started to develop one or two other features, and data capture is something that the sales function have been particularly interested in. The idea being that when you're working with a customer through a Klarifi picture, there'll be points in the discussion when you want to collect some information. For example, what their priorities are, or how many offices they have, or what products and services they've shown most interest in. And so we've created a really simple solution for that, where we've embedded a form in the Klarifi. So in the middle of going through a Klarifi picture, you simply click a data capture form and up it pops, and you can fill in your name, the customer's name, etc., and collect all the data that you like. And then when you press the send button at the end of it, the minute you press the send button, before the customer gets back to their desk, they get a really nice branded email that says, "Thanks for spending some time with us today. This is all the information we've gathered. Here's the link to all the collateral," or whatever it is we want to collect at that stage. I'll be following up in 2 weeks' time. At the same time, the email comes back to you and your organisation. That might come to the sales director or into the marketing function to say these are the next actions, or you could integrate that into your CRM process so that you can really start to define the next step with the customer. It's really all about making it easy for the salesperson and the customer to have a sensible conversation and to be able to collect information and really keep that sales process moving. There's lots of other integration we can do. We're talking to all sorts of organisations now about bringing in GPS mapping, about bringing machine learning and artificial intelligence into it, so we can really start to support sales processes and customer journeys, etc. And the very simplest deployment is just having a rolling demonstration and reception areas. People really love that. So there's loads we can do. Once we've digitized your story and simplified your story and built the underpinning collateral into it and built it into a CRM solution, or CMS solution rather, there's plenty that we can do to help you navigate that sales journey and support the sales function. So we'd love to talk to you more about it. We'd love to give you some demonstrations. We'd like to talk through what it is you're trying to achieve and how we might be able to help you using Klarifi. There are some details here on the screen. Give us a call, get in touch. We'd absolutely love to hear from you. Thanks very much.